Welcome to Thursday, January 29th, 2026. If you or a loved one has suffered a tragic crash, get the firm with the most board-certified and trucking accident law attorneys, nationally renowned and located in Wyoming, Colorado, and Montana. Call Grant Lawson and the law firm for truck safety. Well, the common theme over the last several months has been more winter weather for the Central and East. That's the theme of today's podcast is, again, all the things that are going to be interesting for the most part, weather-wise, won't be happening here. We're going to see, however, as we've been highlighting, some of you in the Dakotas, eastern Montana, Nebraska, far northeastern Wyoming, you've got a little bit of wintry weather coming, especially Friday and Saturday, as the far western reaches of the next Arctic plunge into the nation will reach that far westward, but will stop there. There's going to be very little going on elsewhere with high pressure over the west coast and into the Great Basin, as we'll see a massive storm in the southeast and east central areas of the United States developing this weekend into early next week. So that's where all the energy, that's where all the action is going. We do have this little wave. We were calling them minnows yesterday. We'll do that again. A little minnow will try to slip through late Monday and Tuesday of next week, producing a little bit of high country snow shower activity, and really that's about all. As we take a look at photos across the region, a lot of high and thin clouds coming on in ahead of that Pacific wave, and some nice altocumulus there down in Fort Collins yesterday. So we did see a lot of clouds with that Pacific moisture, and overnight we actually did see a nice little shot of snow in Wyoming's southern mountains, the mountains in northern Colorado with this little Pacific wave. And finally, we've got ice on the North Platte River from last week's and this past weekend's cold weather. Beautiful shot. A lot of folks probably saw the beautiful sunrise in many areas yesterday with all that color. And another great Jan Curtis time lapse of the fire sky yesterday morning across southeastern Wyoming. It just was spectacular in terms of the color, and how the width and breadth of the color across the horizon is quite spectacular. When we take a look at where we're going to be, there's the little wave that came through last night and early this morning. Believe it or not, this little guy, doesn't look like much, is what's going to instigate and become a key factor in what happens along the East Coast and the Mid-Atlantic and New England here in the coming days. We have this low pressure system, and it just is stuck there. It is feeding these minnows through the ridge and coming on through. But we've got to change this configuration. As we've talked, this high pressure ridge has got to be further this way to allow things come over, up, and down into the Great Basin, but that has just barely happened at all this winter season, and it won't again. Just minnows coming through. Here's your Arctic tail, bringing the next big plunge of Arctic air into the U.S. And in the satellite imagery, you can see the spinning clouds there, the counterclockwise rotation up south of Alaska. We do have a lot of clouds with that low that's out in the Pacific, but we have this area of high pressure right here that's just now allowing these systems in, just little pieces of them. When we get into Friday, we see the Arctic air going into the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes. And so the far western reaches of the cold air will get into these areas right here as that cold air pushes. So it's just a little bit more to the east than the push of the colder air that we had last week and this past weekend. So temperatures will plunge across the central and the eastern areas of the United States, while high pressure continues here in the Great Basin and across the far west. Low pressure remains stuck near Alaska, and it's got nowhere to go. When we get into Saturday, you can see we start to see the consolidation of a more organized storm down there across the southeastern United States. We're feeding in Arctic air behind it. We're pulling in warmer, moist air off the Atlantic out ahead of it, and this is just a recipe for a very strong East Coast storm, as we showed you yesterday. Much colder temperatures, wind, and a lot of snow. The heaviest snow, I think, is going to stay off the coast, but there's going to be a clipping of wind, high surf, cold temperatures, and some snow getting into some other areas. So if you've got travel in an airport for the second weekend in a row, Anywhere in the central and eastern United States, you may be facing delays. So you can see the Arctic air push. This is by 11 a.m. tomorrow. So you can see the far western edges. You can see how far westward it gets. If you're in the orange here, the pink, you're looking at above average temperatures. The Arctic air just can't get there, but if you drive a couple hundred miles to the east, you're going to be in the Arctic air. And that Arctic air continues its plunge south. Here is the boundary where there's going to be some snow. Again, not very much, but for the Dakotas, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, into Nebraska, into the upper Midwest, extreme northeastern Wyoming, you are going to get clipped, especially tomorrow night, Friday, and Saturday with colder temperatures and snow. But you get further westward, you're just not looking at anything with this high pressure ridge directing systems up into Canada, up and around and down to our east. So no one is going to get clobbered with snow, but if you are traveling along Interstate 90 in Wyoming or South Dakota, across North Dakota into Minnesota and Iowa, your parts of eastern Nebraska, do be ready for a little bit of the white stuff. And then you can see the purple plunging all the way deep into the deep south. Your temperature anomalies here are quite impressive. So here we go again, another Arctic shot into the central and eastern areas of the U.S. So they haven't warmed up at all from last week's Arctic outbreak, and so they're going to go right through the weekend into early next week with the cold and then all the warmth in the west. Look at these overnight low temperatures by Sunday morning. Not just cold, but you're talking getting into the lower 20s in central Florida. Look at these temperatures here along the southeast coast of Florida. Lower 30s, here's a 30, into the low to mid 30s in the Miami area, even the lower 50s, upper 40s in the Florida Keys. And then, as that storm consolidates, the Carolinas are really under the gun for heavy snow in both North and South Carolina, northern Georgia, back into eastern Tennessee again. Along the coast here, this is going to be a real big problem. Possible blizzard conditions will be forming along the east coast of the North Carolina, southeast Virginia area. And look how close the boundary of heavy snow is getting to the east coast. It could get up into the Boston, Nantucket area, up into portions of Maine with those heavy winds, heavy snow, and Arctic temperatures moving on through. As we get into next week, here's that next minnow. It's going to do about the same as this last one. It's going to produce a little bit of snow in the mountains, a few snow showers on the plains, but again, we can't seem to just get rid of that high, even though lows are going through, until we get this to retrograde back to the northwest, to get this high pressure ridge to retrograde further to the west. The west coast, the Pacific Northwest, the Great Basin, and most of the Rockies will continue to see the weather go up, over, around, and down, as we've seen so far this winter. So this is the only system of any consequence over the next 5 to 7 days coming through the west after the little wave that came through last night. Have yourself a great Thursday. We'll have more for you on Friday.